Welcome to Union Square Loft. My name is Kari, formerly known as Malik. Don't overthink it. It's just my middle name. I'm here with somebody very, very special. I am here with a serial entrepreneur, a lifelong educator, and the creator of About This Life podcast, a podcast dissecting challenges and how to overcome them. I'm here with my mom.
Woohoo!
Hey, Mom.
Hello, Malik.
Hi, Mom. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Well, this is going to be very interesting. For
me too.
Yeah, for us both. Right. So I kind of want to just dive straight into things. I know, like, my name and everything, I go by Kari now. But I also wanted to get into your story. So for those that don't know, my mom literally has 5 names. On her birth certificate,
Yes.
there are 5 names, and Anne Marie is not even her first name, but we're not going to give the government out today. So I wanted to get into that. Your surname is Maloney, which is traditionally an Irish name, and I kind of wanted to ask, what's that about? Where are you from? What is the family story? What's the history? What is, give it to us.
It's interesting because I was in a high school class here in the States, and the choir director, he looks at me, he's calling the names on the roll, and then he says, I should be blonde and blue-eyed.
Ooh.
And I was just wondering, how do I take that? I was such a shy person at the time. But the name Maloney has strength to it. It is strong because we are a family from the islands. So shout out St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
The Island Gals.
I'm an island girl,
Shout out to Pirates of the Caribbean. It was also shot there.
Yes, island girl. And it's interesting because in terms of my family history, what is beautiful is that Maloney is a group of people. They came across the seas, landed in the Caribbean. It turns out my grandfather was like a sea captain. He had a vessel that he would go back and forth on the different islands. I didn't know. Do you know that? Did you know that
I don't know
history?
anything about either one of my
Yes.
grandfathers. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to meet them, but continue.
Exactly. And I only knew them a little bit. I knew my grandmother, Mother P, Mother Pemberton. But getting back to my story, the women in our family have been so strong. My mom, God bless her, Florence Sylvia Maloney, I have to say her full government name. And she came across this ocean, Atlantic Ocean, because she wanted better for her children. And she came ahead because there was a nursing program. And she took opportunity of that. And then my father came shortly after. They came for the American dream. They wanted their children to succeed, and by golly, their dream came true.
I hate to interrupt you real quick, but I don't know if this story is correct. This is just, family rumination. When she moved, she was the first one to move to the States, correct? By herself.
She was the second one.
The second,
My
okay.
auntie Sheila was here.
In your intermediate family, she was the first, though.
She was the first
And then
one,
she proceeded
yes.
to move each child over one by one.
Yes.
Until all of them were there. And father came last.
Yes, absolutely. And that was because of circumstance. Here's something to know about me and our family and the strength and resilience. And it's common in terms of the Caribbean communities as well, is that my mom was basically a midwife. And she gave birth, so she would travel around the island of St. Vincent, and she went wherever the women needed to give birth to their children. So she often left us with aunts or uncles to take care of us. And the Caribbean family, the Caribbean culture has that. We take care of family. And so that has been something just beautiful learning about her. And it's come full circle because her story is my story. She birthed the children. I educate the children. So
That is true. That is true. Before we move on to that, because I do want to touch on the education part and having a lifelong, basically, career in service in the community. It sounds like the Maloney family, was largely a matriarch, which kind of contrasts the American idea of having the patriarchal, the father at the head of the household, the keystone and everything like that, or a 50-50 split that, you know, is commonly expected nowadays. But it sounds like my grandma, or your mother was, you know, kind of the thing that held everybody together.
She did the doggone thing. She did the doggone thing.
So, so sorry.
Go ahead.
How important is education for you? Because my family, they are ridiculous when it comes to education. There are many Ivy Leaguers, and then my mother herself.
HBCUs, come on. HU.
You know. But however, talk about education and don't hold back.
Don't hold back.
About your education first.
My education is that it wasn't if you were going to college. You were expected to go to college. That is the dream that they were pursuing. What I love to say, my claim to fame is I was in college by the time I was 16. I skipped 2 grades, which awesome. And how did I do that? I read
Head
books.
in a book.
Oh, I read a book. I grew up. Daddy was strict. Daddy didn't let baby girl go anywhere. Okay? So the beautiful thing about it is I had time on my hands. So I read. As a consequence, I skipped 2 grades. Now, let me tell you the downside about that. So I'm in college at 16. Everybody's going out bar hopping. Everybody's going out with these fake IDs, whatever. Anne Marie couldn't go.
I don't think you wanted to go, to be honest.
I didn't know any better. I didn't know. I was a quiet, shy girl, introvert, before we knew what those terms meant. And so education was inbred in me. It was inbred in my brothers and sisters. So it was always something that we were going to do. And as part of that legacy, it's what I embedded in you and your brother.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little later.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's probably one of the biggest blessings that the matriarch of our family, my grandmother, has instilled in this family. And it has, within a generation, it has bared so much fruit. And that is something that to witness in real time, and rest in peace to my grandmother, but to witness that in real time and then to be an adult and come full circle and to understand how much you actually pushed us to that level, pushed us to constantly succeed. And again, we're going to touch on this a little later.
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
I want to say
education can never do you wrong.
I want to say something, though. We are a family. Ivy League is in our family. HBCUs is in our family. 3 of us, I have nieces and an older brother that went to Howard. But I also have family who did not complete college. And what I want to say about that, and it's something that I've learned over the years, education is not always something that you learn inside of a classroom or on a college campus. So I want to acknowledge the family members who have made their path, made their way without necessarily going through higher education. There is value in that.
Because it do take talent, nerve, and charisma.
And money.
And money.
Show me the money. But they are just as worthy. And I want to bring out that point because as a teacher and as someone who works with parents, who, I teach middle school, so parents want their kids to go into private high schools and so on and so forth. Education can be all-encompassing, and it can mean a lot of different things to different people. And I want to encourage parents in our community to understand that the college path is wonderful, but for our children who that might not be for them, love on them too. Love on them too.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You didn't know that growing up, but I've learned since. See, I've evolved.
She's evolved, y'all. You heard it first. You heard it here first. So I guess my second question, as well, is to let's get into essentially all the things that have made you, I want to call her mom, but Anne
Call
Marie.
me mom. That I love that.
Okay.
It's okay.
So
I'm
let's talk.
good.
So all the things that make you who you are today. I know you've had experience in marketing and in public relations. You've had experience writing for churches, magazines, working with publicists. You've had now a podcast. You've actually created arts integration programs for these middle schoolers. She's often the chair of her department. She goes out into the county. She's doing things at the universities. What is it about that? What pushes you to like kind of go those different routes and to constantly explore, even into as you age and step into your maturity?
I'm trying to keep up with you.
Right answer. Right answer.
But seriously, longevity in the field is you have to find your passion. You have to find something you love. Education is not for the faint of heart. Because when you're cultivating and you're working with and you're helping to mold so many young people's lives, and in upwards of 140 students a year, nearly 25 years at this point, you have to fill your cup. And so filling my cup have included...
Yeah, what does that look like? You do so many activities as well.
I do so much. You're correct. And arts integration is just a fancy way of saying I integrate music, drama, visual arts, media arts, and so forth into teaching reading and English. And that is because I have always sought out a way to engage students. I am not the teacher if you walk into my classroom and I'm lecturing, that isn't me. I'm not that kind of a teacher. I love for my students to explore, to experience. So I want to create that for them. The fun thing I wanted to talk about from that list that you mentioned is poetry. Woo! Because
let's talk about it.
I always say that poetry found me. I started poetry slams going on 10 years now, thereabouts. And it's become an annual thing. So now in the county where I teach, we are doing something for middle school students. And so we're going to be at our local coffee shop, and we are going to bring students in. They're going places with that poetry slam. And that is one of the things I'm most proud of. Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So in not Adele fashion, we're here to turn the tables a little bit. So we've gotten a little second to know a little bit things about you. So now it's your turn to ask me questions.
Okay. Are we ready?
I'm ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. So in terms of boundaries.
Boundaries.
Malik is a young man. Okay, let me tell all that Malik, as I've seen you mature and grow, it was interesting because you led the way in setting the boundaries for us, your parents. And so my question is, how did you pivot from the expectations of, whether it's your parents or other people, how did you make that pivot from other people's expectations on you to being your own person and setting boundaries?
That's a good question, because I think it was actually me around my preteens feeling two things at once. And it was the tremendous expectation to perform in the nuclear family that we had, because it's, we didn't grow up in a super metropolitan area. It was very much, we grew up in the household. We had my brother, we had you, and it was just, we were very insular. And so it was the tremendous expectation to perform. And then it was also the fleeting kind of thought of, I really don't give a fuck. Can I curse on this podcast? And I kind of knew I marched to the beat of my own drum very, 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 very early on. I always say this now that the benefit of approaching things in our relationship as an adult is that I am now able to see why and the reasons that you chose to do things the way you did growing up. And I'm also able to see and reapproach a relationship in the likeness that I would like us to relate. So no matter what happened, or good or bad, before I moved out, I think it's just my own North Star that I just felt my intuition. I always followed my gut. I've always been on plan A since the jump. You always said this thing that I only had 2 speeds. I knew how to crawl and run.
No, it was sleep and fast.
Sleep and fast.
I used to call you Speedy Gonzalez.
Speedy Gonzalez,
He
yeah.
was always fast. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. So I think it was transforming that fear and that expectation. So many expectations of, being in bands, being in a thespian, being in, on plays, being in, all the clubs, performing high grades, not embarrassing family, putting, putting more value into the family's name. I soon realized that that's what I've been doing just by following my heart and being myself. Mm-hmm. And then by proximity, the Maloney name, those were attached. I think I'm figuring this out in real time.
What is interesting about it, and I'm so grateful for this conversation, is because from your perspective, you look at it as performative. And from my perspective, I looked at it as exposing you to all of these things so that you can, as an adult, select which ones you had a proclivity to. Mm-hmm. I wanted to give you exposure as opposed to saying you have to perform. But perform you did. Can I share the tennis shoe story? Let me share the tennis shoe story. The tennis shoe story. Oh, my word.
The soccer cleats. Or, sorry, for the international community, the football cleats. You can go ahead since you got so excited.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I'm going to say Malik was that child. Because the conservative aspect that I come from, and constricted by it. I've since evolved from that point. But at the time, when he was younger, we would go out and buy his cleats. My way. And everybody had black cleats. Malik went into the shoe store. Was it orange or was it green?
They were blue and orange.
They were blue and orange, neon. And I'm in the store and I'm trying to say, but look at these black cleats, or look at these black and white. And Malik refused. He
Rightfully
refused.
So. He
stood his ground. You stood your ground on that.
And who gonna check me, boo? I'm just kidding. I think that's a wonderful kind of metaphor for how my life is, because I always knew what needed to get done. You need cleats to perform. I played travel soccer. I was on the select team. I also played football and I dabbled in rugby and everything like that. But I know the practicality in the hard truths and the sweetness of life. I knew that very early on, and that was not actually hidden from me. So kudos to you. I thank you for that as well, you and my father. Nothing was kind of sugar-coated. And so when it came to performing and everything like that, and the cleat metaphor, it's just I added my own colors into the story and everywhere I went. And going back to you push me in the performative, also, some of those things is I just showed out and just proved that I could do it. Like going to, I was in and out of public and private school for my entire life as well too. And I remember when I wanted to apply to the school, Archbishop Spalding, which I ultimately left, I'm the one who was proactively filling out the applications, the essays, getting the
He
signatures.
filled it out, y'all, without me knowing.
And then all of a sudden you get a letter and you're like, oh, you got it to private school. And then it was, how are we going to afford it? Then I'm reaching out to the financial advisor. They don't offer sports scholarships. And so I say, well, I have academics, and then we find workarounds. I've always been that type of person, just because of national curiosity. I think eventually, when I became stepping more and more into my truth, and I was going through kind of the normal teenage angst, that I started becoming motivated by spite. And I find that is not one of my biggest regrets, but it was necessary for the journey that I had to take on. For those that don't know, my parents unfortunately separated in high school. So I found myself leaving home around 16, 17. And then just kind of being thrusted into even more of a adult kind of themes, and just figuring out how to survive. And it's not like I didn't have anywhere to come back to. I just knew that this environment at that time was not going to sustain me emotionally, mentally. And it was a very hard kind of experience. But I think I'm built for this.
I think you're built for it too. And let's talk about the ways that you're built for it, Malik. One of the things that I've learned about you is your tenacity and your perseverance. I guess that's two things, huh? Your tenacity and perseverance. You went from community college, and you
With
know,
a 1.8 GPA.
1.8 GPA, commuting.
Granted, I was a chemical engineering student at the time. I didn't want to be no chemical engineering student. As you see, this mic is in front of me right now. Happy that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Shout out to my chemical engineering students, but could it be me? But yes, community college, commuting, not knowing what I wanted to do. I eventually, every semester, I tried to transfer into a 4-year. I finally got into the University of Maryland. And then at one point, UMBC, and at one point, I was enrolled in the community college and UMBC, trying to bring up that GPA.
And again, he applied without telling us. He
yes.
told us after the fact.
And worked my way through both of those institutions, paying out of my own pocket.
And mama's pocket too.
Okay, we'll keep it real.
But he did work. I'll give you that.
A lot.
Yeah.
So did you.
You did work. But that's where all those jobs came in too, giving him some pocket change or
I live by myself. You need more than pocket change, mother.
Yeah, but I had to get up and had to drive him to school and then go into work and then pick you up. You remember those days?
Okay.
And then...
Yeah, I do.
And then you ended up at Columbia University. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Don't know how I did that. I think I was in Williamsburg one time. I moved here about 4 or 5 years ago. I was in Williamsburg one time, and I was on the phone with you. And Hermes, I have a dog. I was just getting lunch by myself. Didn't know anybody in the city besides my best friend Rose, which is the ultimate reason I moved to New York.
Yes.
I was like, Ma, I think I might go to school. Might go to grad school.
Yes.
And then 5 months later, got applications again. And again, going back to the idea of education, I don't say all this for a pat on the back. It's just ironic how life has led me back to this moment, because if you do remember, when I was applying to schools back in high school, I applied to Pratt, to FIT, to all these programs, these film programs, these design programs, these undecided programs with scholarship money. And to go into Columbia in like a comparative politics mindset, to study like performances, hybrid performances, and to suddenly find myself back into this creative kind of atmosphere in this creative space. I think it was always meant to be. And I still believe that I'm still on plan A when it comes to everything. And I think my ultimate passion has no longer become, or my ultimate motivation has no longer become spite. It's become, okay, now I have the possibilities and the ability to actually create and curate what I want. Amen. And living by myself has taught me that the most, living with all these different roommates, people that don't clean up after themselves. It doesn't have to be drama, because I always handled mine.
Well,
but I think that it is a testament to always reevaluate, realign, recenter, everything that has been done to you in the past or that you have done in the past, everything has a consequence. And I realized that if I don't own up to those consequences and have accountability with the types of relationships I want to have with my parents, then it will never be achievable. And so my father's not here, but I'm very happy that you're here because we didn't always get along. And I think that we're able to approach each other now where we want certain things out of a relationship and we want that kind of stronger bond, that stronger understanding. Because I feel some parts of my life I've had to sequester off in the protection of myself, not necessarily because it's you, but because that is what survival is. And now I feel like I'm finally alive.
Finally alive, and help me to remember that thread, because I want to come back to it in my questioning. Mm-hmm. And that it's been a lot. It's been a lot in terms of what our family has gone through. Mm-hmm. And there was a moment in time when I couldn't be the parent that I wanted to be. I know when you were very young, I was everywhere. You know, I'm that parent who every game you ever had or any practice, any place you had to be, I was there regardless of my workload and multiple responsibility, and I was going to support my kids. But as your dad and I separated and eventually divorced, I'm trying to find my footing. And that came at a pivotal time in terms of your age, around 16, 17, around that age. And my whole world shifted in terms of identity, because my identity was defined as mom. And so if I'm not mom, then who else am I? I think a lot of that was a period of turmoil between us. As I didn't understand what you were doing when you moved out.
I was setting up the pieces for my success because I knew I had to do it.
But oh my goodness, from a parental point of view,
I know.
It was a trip, y'all.
I had to depend on myself at that moment.
Yes.
It was a very I would like to say talk about mental health a little bit as well too. It was a very dark time for me from the periods of age of 10 all the way up to 16. Went to multiple different types of therapies and things like that. So I encourage everybody else out there, if you're listening, to definitely seek help, to seek advice, to seek affirmation, and things like that. Definitely check in and like I said, recenter, realign. But I think that's where a little bit of the spite came out of. And I've gone through so many different things to this day that we've never spoke about privately. I had to learn how to suffer privately. I had to learn how to celebrate my successes privately. I had to learn how to cry privately, learn how taxes work privately. I had to learn all these different things. I was signing leases as early as I could remember, and moving to this most expensive city in this country, and finding a way to thrive. I think that what the difference now is I strongly believe I'm also here to edify. And I don't know don't quote me on this. I don't know. Okay. I don't know Miss Merriam-Webster. I don't know the actual definition of it, but I know I'm here to use my crafts to edify and amplify other people's stories. Being the bridge between knowing how to write, to communicate, and to reach often inaccessible communities, and to bring resources and more life, not new life, more life to those stories and those walks of life. I think that is my purpose. I had a lot of experience advocating in DC and Baltimore and things like that.
You have, and I want to get into that too, but I want to first say that I always have to give thanks and praise to the Creator. I think it's a divine intervention. Divine appointment is better, because you are in a creative space in all of that you're doing in terms of producer, filmmaker, all of the things you're doing.
You can keep going. There's a lot of titles.
Advocate, and so on and so
That's
forth.
okay.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in a creative space. Mm-hmm. And that like happened. We were on separate tracks, and here we are, two Aquarians born in the same month.
Aquariuses, yeah.
And oh my goodness, we're in the same space where we are creating. And I love the energy that comes around that. But let me tell you about Malik's Advocate days. Oh my goodness, coming out of Baltimore. Sadly, that came after the tragedy of George Floyd. And I remember, here's the story. Oh my
Told
Lord
from
Jesus.
her perspective.
From my perspective, again, as a parent, I don't know if it's you called. I think you called.
No, you were trying to call.
I was trying
Many
to
people were
call.
trying to call me. And I was
Long
getting
story
maced in front of the
short.
White House.
Long story short, there are protests, cities across America, including the DMV, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, the DMV. And I'm like, where is my child?
He's okay.
And my child was protesting around the White House,
Yes.
getting maced
By the Secret Service.
Oh my!
And I want to tell y'all something. This
oh
is,
my
yeah.
God!
This is not no police force. This is your private militias. And I just felt that I had to show up in that moment for the community. It did not make sense to me. And by the way, that was also the same semester I graduated in the summer that I was also enrolled, still in school, finishing up my undergrad degree. And just working with Our Revolution, working with, Marymount University, all these different, grassroots health organizers.
Yes.
And that was the first time I really got into understanding how to produce an event at a larger scale, and that just wound up turning into many different things and showing people how you can actually show up for the causes outside of just anger. At a certain point,
Yes.
at a certain point, after I organized a protest underneath the at the Lincoln Memorial, because in a state of
And you were
disaster,
a subject of a film. You were in a film.
yes, there's a
after that.
documentary. Shout out to Rianne
documentary.
Pyle and Ryan DeVita. Shout out to them. Freedom Day Film. Stream it now. But I definitely, after a certain point, saw the fatigue in people, and then we came up with new programming. We came up with, a sing-along march where we would march through the streets and sing hymns, sing uplifting songs,
Yes.
get people to register to vote. Advocating for people looks different in so many it looks different, period. And I think that has, again, part of my life's passion, which is to edify others.
Absolutely.
And I think all my life's gift is just power through and figure out how.
Amplify voices. Another proud moment, okay? I'm sharing with our audience all these proud moments that I have of you. Mm-hmm. And another one is, and again, we seem to merge in these creative spaces. And that is when I walk into the Reginald F. Lewis Museum.
Ha!
Yes, I walk into the museum because I'm doing my thing, working with other teachers, and there's a cohort of us walking through. And then another teacher says to me, "Yeah, Marie, isn't that your son? Your picture." Mm-hmm. Shout out to Devin. What's Devin's last name? The photographer.
Devin Allen, yeah.
Devin Allen, your
Amazing photographer.
Devin, you need to connect because I need that picture.
I need that picture.
I need that picture.
Mm-hmm.
We could borrow it 6 months apiece. But I saw your picture, Devin. I'm mom.
Go ahead.
Look.
Sorry.
That picture, to see your child, and it was a profound picture of you in a moment where you were an activist, you were the leader, you were in front of. And I'm like, oh my God, that's my baby.
I try to always be in front of the curve.
Yes.
But I appreciate this. I think there's just so much to talk about, and I appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely.
To discuss these things. I don't know if there's any last minute things that you have
It
to say.
is. I would love for us, in terms of bringing to closure this wonderful conversation. What do you wish I knew about you? And then I want you to
damn.
ask me the same thing.
That's a good question. So I don't know if I think if you didn't know this now, then I think you always knew it was written. And what I mean by it was always going to be. We were always going to be okay. We were always going to be exceptional, because it was just, I don't know how to explain it. It's just the things that were passed down, starting with your mother and your grandmother. We're always going to be okay as a family. And I think by us sharing our story, maybe it'll motivate somebody else. And it doesn't have to be this traumatic story filled in so many different things. But I think that, the time is now. Own your future. We have had so many different trajectories operating in different lanes, and occasionally they merge and then they veer off and they come back together, and they, our stories and our successes are always written. And, the only thing you have to do is persevere and be prepared, because everything that is coming your way, it's never going to come on your time. And I've learned that every single day. That's the biggest thing you asked me to know. Patience. I was a stubborn kid. Yes. You couldn't tell me nothing, but it wasn't like out of, frustration. It was just out of like, I thought about this logically, and this is my thesis behind it. You often said I should be a lawyer.
Yes, he gave me the thesis.
But yeah, so I guess flipping it back on you, what is something that what's the question that you've always...
That you want to know.
Okay, yes.
You would want to know. I would want you to know that just watching you grow and evolve, from you being a wee baby, and all the stages that you've gone through, that you inspire other people and you inspire me. What you do, how you you have a dream and you have manifested it, or in the process of doing that, and it takes so much to do it. And I want you to know that the people you surround yourself with, who are helping you manifest that dream, how grateful I am for them. And I go back to the divine. I go back to God, because when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so for all of those people who have fed you metaphorically and literally, I am just so grateful to God that they have poured into you, because you have a mission and purpose on this earth.
Ooh. Thank you.
I go deep.
Yeah.
I go deep.
And thank you. That is all the time that we have today. Again, welcome to Union Square Loft in Union Square, New York. I am Kari, formerly known as Malik. Don't overthink it. It's just my middle name. And you are...
Anne Marie, about this life where we change our lives one day at a time.